106 ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੇਖੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਅਕਾਲ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਕੋਨੇ ਤੋਂ ਲਾਈਵ ਜਾਂ ਡੀ ਲਾਈਵ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਪੂਰੀ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹੈ। ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹਾਈ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਕਵਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦੇ ਪੈਗਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਘਰ-ਘਰ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਰਿਕਾਰਡ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰੋ 07702748906 ਤੇ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। Welcome to a post-election special edition of Encounters. Today we've got with us 4 guests who were previously participants on the election debate where we had prospective candidates who have since found out whether they've won or whether they've lost. Their personal lives and whether they won or not is not our concern. Our concern is where the land lies now, the result, what we think of it, where we think and how we think governance will go forward from here, and whether or not there's a prospect of an early election coming within the next 5 years. And with me today to discuss such a thing is Dr. Gurnam Singh, who is a presenter here and also a lecturer at Coventry University in the Sociology Department. Jaspreet Bandal, who is the General Secretary of Castwatch UK. And to my right is Sukhvinder Kaur of Sikh Relief. And obviously friend of the show, and our resident radicalisation and extremism expert, Jaswant Bora. Welcome to the show, everybody. Waiguru ji ka khalsa, Waiguru ji ki fateh. Jaswant, you're probably the best person to start with. Since we did our debate, there were, acts of terrorism. The first time ever in a UK election campaign was such a thing to happen. 22 dead in one and 8 in the other. Who was to blame?
This is a question that continues to repeat itself, and the timing again is very strategic, isn't it? It's not coincidence. I don't believe it's a coincidence that this took place at this particular time. And we see it all over the world, in Syria, Afghanistan and other places where certain attacks take place just before something big's going to happen on a political spectrum. But far as this is concerned, whether they did these attacks with the understanding to influence some of the political decisions that's got to be made in favour of themselves, and we can talk about foreign policy, we can talk about the aspects of it. But it seems to be quite consistent since the attacks in March, Westminster, and we've had Manchester, and again it's opened a whole new wide range where a young girl at 8 was killed, and that just opens a whole spectrum again, and it broadens our understanding to say these people are very brutal and very severe, and it takes us back to understand how other groups operate. And then we've got what happened in London at this particular time. Again, we can sit here and speculate, we talk about ISIS, and incidentally while we're on this show I'm led to believe that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS, has allegedly been killed. This is going up within the last 24 hours. He was in Raqqa, so we need to establish that. If that be the case, then obviously we're yet to see who will stand in this place or how these groups and terrorists grow. Is it going to continue? I believe, yes it is. I've said it before numerous times on numerous occasions. Theresa May has been elected on the basis, okay, there's a minority. And
she was the Home Secretary before becoming Prime Minister.
And she's very
the last 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years. But initially when we spoke to Chris on the show, and I raised a question around Prevent and the strategy around it. Labour was responsible for its proliferation, and we saw it, and the money came from various sources to fund it.
Just what I'm asking you, we will move on to Prevent, we will move on to those things, because they were part of the election sort of campaign strategies and ideas that were being mooted around what other parties and what alternatives were on offer. But with regard to the actual terrorist atrocities that happened in a campaign, in an election campaign for the first time in British history, who was to blame for those people being on the street and not being part of any kind of intelligence operation where they were even being monitored?
Well, it ties back to what I said at the opening. when you're talking about intelligence, who's taking the blame for that responsibility of letting them
Well, is it
slip
the
through
London
to-
Mayor, like Donald Trump suggests?
Yeah.
Is it Theresa May, as you know,
But does-
almost every Labour supporter suggests?
Yeah, but
Who is it? Where does
But-
the buck stop?
But this is the thing, the question we keep asking ourselves and we keep seeing on the TV is falling back to security intelligence services. Remember, intelligence has to be shared, information has to be shared on a particular basis. Could this have been prevented? Possibly, possibly not, we're not sure. Were they on the radar? To some extent, we hear there were, from far as MI5 is concerned, with some of these in London, and that's coming up to the forefront. JTAC is responsible, which is a joint terrorism
Yeah.
analysis centre in assessing levels of threat. So it goes back to sharing of accurate information, but we also need to make it very clear on the basis of the timing of it. If the information has been shared even quickly, probably 24 hours before there's a potential attack going to be taking place because of certain particular people are on the radar. But the problem is, why is not the enforcement or security services or whoever's responsible to that extent taking quicker, more expeditious action? It seems to be we're learning lessons after something takes place.
Yeah.
But I do believe there's information out there that we need to know. I do believe that it needs to be shared more quickly. Could this have been prevented? There's a possibility it could have. We do believe that. Same with 7/7. And same with other, Jubilee Rigby. These people have attended marches. Now, why isn't nobody arresting them? It's okay for her, Theresa May, to say enough is enough.
Since 7/7, we have the added dimension of a jihadi war that is taking place in Syria, that people are actively participating in and then returning, and several of these people have done so.
what the government- what the government-
in a Channel 4 documentary, wasn't he?
Absolutely.
Well,
yeah.
listen,
He
what
was
the-
quite
These people were
famous.
not unknown.
Well, but you see
Yeah.
what the government's saying, there's legislation in place, there's this in place, but the question is, why is no one activating legislation to take the particular action? So we're going to look at
If
where the buck
legislation
lies, where the
exists,
blame lies.
if legislation exists and is not being enforced, that's a law enforcement issue. Dr. Singh,
No, I think
where
that-
does taking 20,000 police off the streets come into all of this?
Well, I mean, that's obviously part of the equation. If you haven't got the bobbies on the beat, those, let's be honest, some of those terrorists were reported.
Yeah, there was.
They were reported by the Muslim community, but I suppose even if you report, then you still need to have the logistics to follow that up.
Yeah.
To begin, because I think they get a huge number of reportings every year. You can't follow everything up, so that's where I think the kind of bobbies on the ground could have helped.
Isn't that what the general, the Greater Manchester Police chief had actually said that in 2015?
Definitely, yeah.
Had actually said that taking these police off the street was going to
Yeah, but
remember,
drastically reduce our ability.
But I think
to
that there's
collect
not. I mean, Theresa May
intelligence.
was part of that policy. I mean, Jazz is an expert, but it seems to me one of the problems is if you think that MI5 on its own can solve this problem,
Exactly.
then they don't understand how communities work. You've got to have people on the ground in the communities,
absolutely.
connecting with bobbies on the beat. But I think there's something else significant about that attack, and that's really to do with the fact that, and I think there's some truth in this. If you look at, say, Anjan Chowdhury, I mean, for many years, and some of those people were inspired by his inflammatory speeches. There was the documentary that was made. That the government felt that they didn't have the power under the Human Rights Act to actually, pull them off the streets. I know Anjan Chowdhury is now in prison. And Theresa May did talk about that afterwards. She says, if I have to do what it needs to take whatever action, and she hinted at the Human Rights Act. So maybe, although I know that Labour has said, look, we can do it within the existing framework.
Absolutely.
But I
yeah.
do think there's an issue.
He came out and said that he prosecuted some very serious offenders,
Yeah.
and the Human Rights Act was not a barrier in that.
The fact that she's saying human rights are stopping her from doing anything.
It's
and
an
addressing
oxymoron,
it.
isn't it?
It's
That was an
ridiculous.
oxymoron. Anyway.
They're there for a reason. They're there to protect our basic rights as human beings, not to be treated as anything but a human being. So whether that we agree with what those people are doing or not, they've got those rights, and those rights shouldn't
Well,
be
they're talking about
infringed upon.
internment now. They're talking about internment, and you can't do that under the existing human rights legislation.
But as Dr. Gunnar said, which I agree to one point definitely, is that when they're talking about liaising with community and police officers, which is difficult to do when they're short in proximity in terms of manpower. Yes, there's more financial contribution efforts made into counter-terrorism, but in terms of that, I remember when I attended the last Prevent consultation, and the head of the OCT was there, Charles Farr back in 2010. I asked some of these questions directly to him. You know, what about looking at parenting? What about engaging the community? And that they conceded the fact we don't know really what to do. Their level of expertise and their level of input lies with information sharing, assessing risks, blah blah, etc., local, national, regional, international. But at grassroots level now, and I agree to that, we need more people out there with the resources, with everything, at a time where they're pulling the resources and pulling the
If
funds.
it takes 100 people to operate a submarine, there's no good taking 75 people away and then paying the remaining 25 people a 75% increase on their salary. That's not going to
I
help.
think that's part of how Jeremy Corbyn won the public over. Is by just understanding those basic things. He mentioned
And I
the
think he
policing
didn't
issue.
just put it down to one thing. I think what we've all discussed here is that there was probably failings on a multiple level, but to deny the fact that, you know, if you're taking those community support officers, these are the people that day in, day out go on those streets, then you have to look at communication and information sharing across from that local level to the national, international level, and there's definitely been a failing there. Because for me, as just a normal British citizen, if there is a man who's appeared on a Channel 4 documentary about his extremist views, has then gone on to perpetrate an attack.
Well, this is why under the new bills that's going through, like extremist disruption orders and other bills that Theresa May is proposing, even as Home Secretary and now as Prime Minister, these are yet again additional measures to stop particular extremists. But does that stop or disrupt an ideology? And we have to look at it further, deeper. It's more deep-rooted. There's a lot more to it. Can that stop an ideology, or does it become very active once the ideology surfaces, but by then the damage is already done?
I think that could be a red herring. I mean, you know, there are perverse ideologies around the world, and you need to obviously oppose them. But I think this is also a result, I think, of many, many years of wider social policy, which has led to massive inequalities. Now, I'm not saying that those terrorists in themselves, you know, they might be well off, and we know that sometimes they are. But a lot of the foot soldiers that are recruited are often alienated, they're often struggling with employment. They're often in families where there's violence, and what we've seen is, I come from a social work background, so you know, we do child protection, we do investigations of child abuse, but we don't do preventative work. There's no community social work. We've abolished youth services. And you know, if you look at France I mean, in France, if you go to the Banyules, if you go to Marseille, if you go to the outskirts of the cities, the state isn't involved. It's almost as if they've been abandoned. I think we've done the same here. And I think Corbyn is right. You know, we have to invest in public services, public welfare, and a collective kind of society. Otherwise, you will find these people kind of, you know, they're rich pickings for ideologues.
But that's where they're coming from. And the reports from David Anderson, the previous independent reviewer of terrorism legislation, said some of these people that were caught disrupted, or plots that were foiled, and there are plots that have been foiled each year, little do we realise, or if that information has come on the media, they were caught in places or disrupted in places, or conversations heard in cafes and kind of parks, and it's made it very clear in the report. So some of these conversations, back to what you said, we had somebody on a national and international documentary or TV, and he was right there in front of us, ready for the picking, and we kind of almost let him go. We need tougher action when it comes to these kind of issues where somebody's on the radar. What Lord Carlisle has also suggested again is to go back to control orders, with a form of monitoring that came in the 2005 legislation, Terrorism Act, where it's a bit like an in-house arrest, isn't it? You monitor an individual. I kind of see the understanding and the value and the purpose of him saying something like that.
Do you think these terrorist acts cost the incumbent government any votes?
They will cost it on the basis whereby...
No, do you think they did?
I think they had an influence. Because if you're looking at, for example, the Muslim community feel marginalised, then Labour may be in the views of either some as oppressing the Muslim community because of the base of prevent or British values, whatever the case may be, they're more inclined to go towards somebody else who's going to be a bit more lenient, a bit more understanding around incorporating, you know, diverse communities, other faiths, and etc. Which they haven't. They, you know, kind of historically,
well, they have, but they're responsible for the. If we're talking about foreign policy being a bugbear for wannabe jihadis, then Iraq. And Libya also.
I think,
so they're all guilty.
I think it did affect the election. I think it actually, Corbyn lost votes because of it. Partly because the gutter press, the Daily Mail and the Sun, actually the day before the election had this heading where they were, you know, putting Corbyn compared to jihadists. It had Jezza and then jihadist. And, you know, the Mail was even more explicit in terms of saying Corbyn basically is a supporter of terrorism.
Daily Telegraph had
it was shocking.
Richard Dale,
so I think that probably did take some votes away from them.
So
I think-
But then I also think for Theresa May, I think it did also have an effect on the
Yeah.
Tories as well, because I think you could not escape the fact that she was Home Secretary.
for 7 years.
I think there
yeah,
was two
before that,
sides
yeah.
to it.
There
I
was two
think.
sides, and I think both sides
Yeah.
suffered.
With people that were more empathetic and feel that being harsh isn't working, or trying to be ridiculously tough and not actually understanding the issue, have gone towards Jeremy Corbyn and Labour. And whereas she's immediately come out saying, I'm going to be tougher.
Yeah.
And just saying that when people are scared is going to make people feel, okay, well, she's going to try and address something. How she's
It's
going
a
to do
false
it, God
economy,
knows.
though,
but-
isn't it? You're saying you're going to be tough, but you've had 7 years to do
Exactly,
it. And
exactly. And people forget that just because
Yeah.
they're scared. They just want someone to be saying something that
Yeah.
And
they can
Conservative
understand.
have been very much taking the bull by the horns over the years, because it was them that really did the review of terrorism legislation, and they commissioned it, and Tony Blair kind of followed through. But who took us into Iraq was the decision of Tony Blair,
Yeah.
Labour Prime Minister.
Yeah.
He had casualties,
But
we had
he'd
consequences.
taken the UK into Bosnia before that.
Yeah. But what I'm saying, in terms of the fueling, what I call the kind of new wave of terrorism, or the next generation of terrorism, which is really post 9/11 going into Iraq war. Numerous people have died. We've had suicide bombers in this country. Kind of not really heard of before until 2005. So it's opened a whole new wave, and that's what the terrorism research and kind of all the literature suggests about this new particular wave, and kind of jihadi wave, because we got all these other arguments, and we need to iron these out politically about things like jihad. There's an offensive, there's one that talks about a struggle. Everyone says is talking about it's a particular struggle, but a lot of people, a lot even sympathise that justify jihad is justified in this country on a particular basis.
Okay, but there's a lot of people struggling in this country.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
disabled people struggling. The struggle is universal.
Well, if you want to kind of widen the debate,
Yeah, we
a bit
are, yeah.
more,
That's exactly
I mean,
what we're
I think there were two kind of really crucial factors. One was young people. There is some objective analysis now. There's some statistics coming through that young people really came out in strength, and I think older people as well. Who were worried about losing their homes and stuff. So that, I think that the abolishing student fees has been a massively popular move, and I think not a populist move, and I think it's a good move. It's I work in a university, and I know that introducing the student fees has had a damaging effect on education. Students have been turned to customers, and it's really about satisfaction rather than learning.
Even the smallest thing, one of my friends, she told me that her son, who's 5 years old, they took a little vote within class, and he voted Labour because he was going to give them free lunch.
Yeah.
And it's so weird that
Yeah.
little kids are even identifying this, and it's become
and
more
that-
engaging at more levels.
And to me, that opens up the whole realm of things like poverty, because if we've got 4 million children living in poverty in this country, which is very
in
disturbing.
2017.
Yeah, we're talking England democracy. At one time, it was the kind of political
Apparently
power of the
developed
world, wasn't it?
world.
Like one of
Yeah.
the strongest whole economy. And then £8,000 per household is the average debt. So how are we going to erase all that and still at the same time provide the level of strength in numbers of police officers, provide them funding, money and resources for places like NHS, social care and all these kind of other factors. Look at introducing, abolishing fees for one. I mean, the average student, as Dr. Gurnham says, is going to be 30 or 40,000 pound in debt
Yeah.
as soon as you leave. So really, you're already in trouble. And
Yeah.
and we're coming from, and talking culture now, and the way we were brought up, whatever the case.
So it's
we
not
had
just the
certain things.
students who vote, it's the parents, because the parents,
Exactly.
especially in I think minority communities,
Yeah.
they don't like to go into debt, do they? So it's a huge burden for them.
So we saw it seems like now, and she's gone into work with the DUP, which is still early
She's
negotiations.
attempting to.
Well, that's it's early negotiations. It's not really, in essence, being put in concrete in stone yet, because it could turn. But that could also have an influence now, because Jeremy Corbyn did actually, and let's be honest, flip the other side, did do well in this election in terms of voting, or people actually came out. Now, can you imagine? I know we're going to be talking about it as we go along. Can you imagine if they come out in full force and it happens again, and they trigger for another vote? But in Brexit as well, we're going to take in consideration. Brexit's about to happen. She's going to be in 2 weeks. She says she wants to go into straight negotiations into Brexit. So my question is, what is she going to negotiate? Have yet not stabilised the government?
Yeah.
Have not yet stabilised certain policies, certain things she's still got to review and look at. And we're talking about.
Do you
some of
think
these
she has a
as well.
mandate?
I mean,
I don't.
It's okay. Do you
No.
think she has a mandate to
Oh,
go
no.
into Brexit negotiations?
Not anymore. I think the way she handled this campaign, I think going into this election, even though I've always been a Labour supporter, been a Labour activist, been at campaign through it, I always had a lot of respect for Theresa May, being a woman, becoming a Prime Minister.
And she said all the right things when
She
she
said-
became leader.
Yeah.
She would talk about social justice,
Yep, she said all the right
discrimination.
things.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I thought, well, if you have a government, I'm willing to see the positive in it. Then we saw the call of the snap election, and for me, it was very obvious
Well, the
why that
U-turn
was.
of the snap election.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
yeah, the
It was
U-turn
adamant,
of the
she
staff
was
election,
adamant
yes.
she was not going to call an election.
Oh, yeah, we're
I'll tell you what, I think this is my theory, is that because when she was Home Secretary, she had two or three advisors that were kind of, as it were, protecting her, insulating her from the rest of the government, yeah? But when she became leader, remember, she was a Remainer.
She was a Remainer.
So
Vocal.
she enters to appease the Brexiteers, Boris Johnson and all these others. Some of them fell by the wayside. But Michael Gove was brought in at the last minute, if you realise. I think they were breathing down her neck. She had her advisors. They probably put their own manifesto without consulting them, thinking that she'd get away with it. But I think that she was feeling they were breathing down her neck. And I think that this is where she is now. She's trapped between, the kind of Boris Johnson and his crowd who are after blood. And still appeasing the Remainers. I think, in a sense...
A week tomorrow, those Brexit negotiations begin.
Yeah.
Does she have a mandate? Does she have a mandate to take those?
Well, not for a hard Brexit,
negotiations
she
on?
doesn't. Not for a hard
No, for
Brexit.
any. But a hard Brexit comes at the end of the negotiations,
Yeah.
whether you leave or not. Does she have a mandate to even begin those negotiations
I think
next week?
she's humiliated herself.
I think
and
she's
she's put
destroyed
us
it, yeah.
into. She's made us very weak going into these
Yeah. So
negotiations.
She's
Quick
made
yes or no.
herself
Quick
weak.
yes or no. Do you think she has the mandate to go
No.
through to begin the negotiations the Monday after next?
Personally, I don't think she can survive more than a couple of months. In fact, I'm not even sure she'll get Queen's Speech through. That's my view.
Okay.
I think they'll let
That's
her
right.
through. No, I don't think she has it.
She don't have a mandate to start the negotiations.
No.
It's a difficult one
That's
to be honest
universal,
for me. Because considering when David Cameron saw it, he just pulled out and said that was it for him. When he
Exactly.
saw us come out of Europe, he
So
saw something that we
are we saying that she
Yeah.
doesn't have a mandate to begin the negotiations, even though Parliament has the final say whether they agree with the
She has-
negotiated
She
position?
has pre-existing stuff, which really she's inheriting David Cameron's kind of policies,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
So he was pretty clear on what he wanted, and we all know it's pretty clear. He's very good. He was, as I must say, I give him, a pat in the back as a Conservative Prime Minister. Is very good, and he kind of clear what he wanted.
He
But
fought
we're not
on
very clear what Theresa May wants.
compassionate conservatism.
Well,
He
yeah,
fought on compassionate conservatism, and this was full-on right-wing conservatism. This was the Rayner review, the Naylor review, sorry, and the possible asset stripping of the NHS.
Yeah.
This was scaling back on disability allowances
Yeah.
and benefits.
I mean, I
and
think the
means
other
testing,
important point
social.
is this. I mean, putting the policy issues to one side, she actually was a very poor candidate. She was a very poor at making her case. She seemed like a fish out of water. It's almost like she's robotic. And I think that this is where Boris Johnson's camp will come in and say, look, her poor leadership is what lost us the election. Let's bring in Boris Johnson, who's got a track record of being Lord Mayor of London.
Yeah.
He won it twice. In London, which was, heavily against the Tories. That's going to be his argument. If you want to pull the Tory party back together, Boris Johnson's your man.
And that's what they're saying now, aren't they? That
Yeah.
it's not even a discussion of Theresa being an opponent to Jeremy Corbyn, because they're now saying Jeremy Corbyn looks like he's ready to be the next Prime Minister.
Yeah.
They're saying it's Boris
Yeah,
versus
yeah.
Corbyn. And that's
And
concerning when
She's already been dismissed.
we've
really.
got
I
a
think
different
so.
Prime Minister.
She's a lame
dismissed.
duck leader
Yeah.
at the moment.
And any time we talk about Conservatives, they're very quick to issue out and distribute kind of policies and legislation and laws. And I've seen it with David Cameron from 2010. And we talked about terrorism. He was the one that introduced the Extreme Task Force. He's the one that came and did the due diligence and extremism group that sits in the Department for Education. And he's very quick to proliferate and install departments for the purpose of addressing these kind of issues.
But
So
it's the
but-
following, is
but
the
this is it.
assessing them.
And that's what I'm saying, and they're putting bills through and legislation through and terrorism
Yeah.
legislation. So there's quite a lot he did in the space of 5 years, so I commend him on that basis. But I'm yet to see that with Theresa May. Okay, it's a bit of a short time, but even still, David Cameron, when he shuffled his whole cabinet around, he moved very quickly with the Prevent review. So he moved quite quickly on that kind of basis. Now, what has really Theresa May suggested to do?
Well, I think she's inherited a lot of the mistakes that he's made, though, because
Well,
you're saying that he
yeah.
was being so quick. For example, with apprenticeships, they said there are going to be 3 million apprenticeships. They've created
Yeah.
an institute for that. There is no structure in place for apprenticeships at all. I work within education. It is terrifying. There's people on apprenticeships. They don't know where they're going. Some of them aren't even
Well,
approved. The funding is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's changed.
That-
Well,
that's
actually,
what she's
I mean,
inherited.
the
A bit of a
point-
front, isn't it?
It
with
is-
the
it
Well,
is
video?
the
pathetic.
point there is government is dysfunctional at the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll give you another good example. In the universities, we have what's called a Teaching Excellence Framework, TEF, which is a bit like an Ofsted review. It was supposed to be published this week, and they held it over because of the election, which is going to rate every university in terms of gold, silver, bronze. They've postponed it now because they haven't got anybody in the Conservative Party to defend the government in terms of the results.
well, they didn't have anybody in the Conservative Party to defend their position on our debate.
Yeah, but in a sense
Theresa May didn't
they
go to
can't
their own
even
debate.
defend their own policies that were
Yeah,
enacted
absolutely.
before the election. So they are actually in a state of they're kind of in a stalemate at the moment.
Is it a sense of arrogance where they just
Yeah.
believe that they're going to be better than
Yeah.
what the media have shown is their opposition, and that the votes are pretty much in the bag?
That's why she
We
did
just
it.
need to
But
turn up on the
that's
day.
how the
innit?
whole
Yeah.
campaign
That's
was.
how
When
she
we
did
had
it.
Arrogant, they were arrogant.
there was a Sikh Council event that happened in Nottingham where Amber Rudd came to launch the Sikh Aware platform,
Yes.
and there was just a small interaction that I picked up at the end where she spoke to a colleague, and the colleague was a Labour councillor, and they introduced themselves, and then she was like, "Oh well, you know, we know you won't have much luck in this election, but." You know, all the
The
best,
arrogance of it,
all the
the
best
arrogance of
anyway.
it.
Which-
She's very polite about it, but there was that sort of
Yeah.
condescending.
And she nearly lost her
She
seat
nearly
as well.
lost her seat.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean,
So I'm going to lose my job in a minute. We've got to go to an advert. We'll be back after the break with more discussion of the election and its aftermath. वाहिगुरू जी का खालसा वाहिगुरू जी की फतेह जी।
ਇੱਕ 106 ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੇਖੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਅਕਾਲ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਕੋਨੇ ਤੋਂ ਲਾਈਵ ਜਾਂ ਡੀ ਲਾਈਵ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਪੂਰੀ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹੈ। ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹਾਈ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਕਵਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦੇ ਪੈਗਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਘਰ-ਘਰ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਰਿਕਾਰਡ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰੋ 07702748906 ਤੇ।
Waiguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waiguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back. We're still here with our panel. We're still trying to get to the bottom of what's happened last Thursday. We don't have a clear winner. We have a party with a few more seats than another party. We've had 2 terrorist attacks in the middle of it all. We've had a vitriolic media campaign smearing one and glossing over the gaping wounds of another. So we've discussed the Conservatives, their perceived arrogance, and their assumption that they were going to just walk this election with a manifesto, don't need to cost it. It doesn't matter, nobody's going to read it.
Or
We'll
make it applicable
we'll
to,
just carry
to
on
the
as if it's
core
gonna
vote
go on.
count, which is the elderly.
So what did Corbyn... I was going to ask, what did he do right? How did he survive a media assassination? How did he dodge that
I
bullet?
think
The
his-
first...
oh, sorry.
Sorry. We all jumped
I'll
in there,
jump in
didn't
then.
we?
He appealed to the conscience of the people, then he appealed to some of the real issues, he appealed to some of the grievances, he appealed to some of the failures of the other government, obviously so. And he talked about basically a fresh start, really some new Labour kind of concept that he's got. And I think we discussed it earlier, he's jumped on the issue around tuition fees, which is a very big one. So we've got a lot of young people to come out. There was less young people at the last election that came out and voted. That went up, interesting enough. So and obviously, and this negotiation around Brexit, for example, is appealing to that aspect of people's conscience and aspects of their future and aspirations and what they want to do.
I think I'm just going to come in there because I think what he actually did very successfully was he turned the narrative from Brexit, because Theresa May called the election and she tried to justify
Yeah.
that this is an election about Brexit.
That was the central plank.
That was the central. But what he actually did was, look, you know, Brexit is 2 years. This is going to be a 5-year government. What about
Yes.
these
Yeah.
issues that
Yeah.
our country and our people
Yeah.
are facing? And he did that very well. And you cannot underestimate how fantastically their social media campaign was.
Yeah.
They were very much on the ball, and they very much encouraged the youth vote.
Yeah.
They actually got, you know, key figures within the youth grime artists, people like Akala who are very popular, and they got these people to endorse. I mean, these people weren't even endorsing the Labour Party; they were endorsing Corbyn
Jeremy
as a
Corbyn
person.
individually.
And Akala, for example, voted for the first time.
Yeah.
And he's very much anti that. So
He's
it
an
was interesting
abstainer,
that he.
Well, I
he's
think
engaged on a level.
I think that Corbyn did capture the minority vote, and I think it was a very inclusive
When you say minority, do you mean BME?
ethnic minority vote.
Yeah.
Yeah, BME minority vote. I mean, he even got some of the white minority vote. I mean, we thought that the UKIP vote would go to the Tories. It kind of got split, really.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the white working class also came back to Corbyn. But I think we should acknowledge that we've got at least 5 Punjabi MPs in Parliament now. We've got Seema Malhotra and Sharma who were there before, but we've also got Dan Desi and Preet Shergill as well.
Gill, no.
First
Yeah.
female.
Preet Kaur Gill,
Yeah.
and Manjeet Singh Dhesi.
Preet got Shergill, and also we've got Mahmood as well from Khalid Mahmood. He's also Punjabi, so there's plenty of Punjabis in there.
Khalid's been in there for like 20 years.
So big it up for the
Congratulations.
Punjabis, and they're all Labour. So I think that's something. So maybe we need to
Is
have
there a thing about Punjabis though? Because Khalid Mahmood is more Punjabi than most.
Yeah.
He's a guy that brought Punjabi electioneering tactics to the UK in 2015 and was investigated for those.
But I think
So,
it's good. Dan Desi, for example, I saw a wonderful speech that he did at Mosque just today. And I think it could help
in Urdu as well.
In Urdu as well.
Absolutely.
I think that that this could actually open up a kind of dialogue, because I think there's been a bit of friction amongst minority communities around.
I agree.
And then that what you
Grooming
said,
of things,
it was
yeah.
interesting to see.
Yes,
There was some for kind of ethnic B&M communities. There was some black female MPs that have been elected. I think that's brilliant.
Well, Preet Kaur was the first
Gill.
female
female
Sikh
yeah.
MP
Sikh, I mean,
ever
I'm talking
Preet Kaur
Sikh as
Gill.
well.
in the
as
UK. There's been one in
incorporating
Canada.
A whole wide range. I think
Yeah.
there was 2 black females that were.
Yeah, there was.
One was visually impaired.
And I think that's a very
Eleanor
big
Smith
landmark for
from
BME as opposed to
Yeah.
Indian. I think that,
Yes,
that in
yeah.
itself, that's why this election changed the wave of it in that respect for BME communities.
But it-
Yes, Indian and etc. and also with the black community.
And I think this is where I
Yeah.
think Corbyn, in some senses, Corbyn hasn't reproduced old Labour. I think New Labour's dead,
New Labour's
old
definitely
Labour's dead.
Yeah.
I think what we've got is a kind of, I don't know what you call it, kind of cosmopolitan Labour or something.
Socialist Labour?
A
Well, I
socialist
actually think
Cool.
socialist.
The dreaded
No,
word.
I
You
think
said
in some
it.
sense, in some sense the word socialist is dead as well.
Absolutely.
I think that we're seeing something new. I think he just presented as common sense.
Revolutionist.
But he's
Yeah.
redefined Labour in a way
Yes,
that
yeah.
nobody
I
else has
shifted the-
even envisaged.
I like the way you said that, and I would call it probably reformist Labour or
Yeah.
revolutionist Labour, where it's something entirely brand new, isn't
Yeah.
it? So to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
speak.
I mean, it was hardly revolutionary Marxism. It was kind of. I mean, if you think about, it was more like Scandinavian kind of social
Yeah.
democracy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And that's a good place to start, because if you look in Scandinavia, you find, inequalities are much less in Scandinavia. Life expectancy is much greater. So I think that people are beginning to think, this greed, everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Forget the
Scandinavian democracy, we see national wealth
Yeah.
being exactly that, the wealth of the nation, spent on the nation. And the social care systems out there, I mean, people...
Well, you mentioned the wealth of nations.
maternity
It was,
leave
of
for
course,
4 to 5
Adam
years.
Smith, the famous Scottish philosopher who wrote the book Wealth of Nations, which
Yeah.
was really the kind of the Bible for capitalism. Yeah, but Adam Smith said, if capitalists become so greedy that they just impoverish the population,
Yeah.
they'll just
Said it
become
himself.
like medieval robber barons, and in fact the system will collapse. So even Adam Smith said the system would collapse if it becomes
Are we seeing
so
that
unequal.
across the world already?
I think so. I think people are turning against the system.
I mean, you have
Yeah.
Fukuyama saying the end of
Question,
history. It wasn't the end of history.
Well, the end of history there, Fukuyama's thesis was that, neoliberal capitalism has triumphed in the world.
Absolutely. And this
It's
is
collapsing. 2008 was the beginning of the collapse of that.
Yeah.
And I think this is the wave that Corbyn's riding now.
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
it. Okay, Corbyn did that. Liberal Democrats kind of
Who?
self-imploded. Oh, no, that's
Very.
not nice.
I think he did. I think they did fairly well, actually.
think so?
I think Tim himself did not help himself
No.
Through the campaign.
through the campaign by just dodging questions. That's what Jeremy
The
did.
homosexuality question.
Yeah, things like that. That's what Jeremy addressed well.
But do you think
When
that
he was
cost him
president.
Well, the
votes?
irony is that he dodged it, and now the DUP.
And the DUP are right there.
Coming to
They're
government, who are
Yeah.
actually homophobic.
Yeah,
let's be
yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
I'll just correct that.
You couldn't make this
They're not
stuff up, the
homophobic, but
irony
they've
of it
certainly
all.
got a policy against gay marriage, yeah?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Well, no.
Okay.
I'd say homophobic.
Okay.
And anybody already Googling Ofcom, go for it, knock yourselves out. There are
These are his views, not the cartel.
the deputy leader of the DUP is on record as wanting to outlaw and make illegal homosexuality.
Yeah.
That's not the marriages, that is relationships between two human
Which is why
beings.
the Scottish Labour leader came out and
Absolutely,
She's
yeah.
actually gone over there and tried to have some
But the thing is,
dialogue with them.
she's come out and said that she needs an assurance that none of the legal protections for homosexuality will be reneged on.
Yeah.
Other than that, she's happy to have them in and no problem, as long as it's only the Fenians.
And obviously they're against
That are the target.
abortion as well.
Abortion, yeah.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
to some extent,
Anti-abortion, yeah.
female rights, they're
Yeah.
not particularly strong on that either.
Absolutely.
How can
Some
we
of their
be...
views
No,
and
but then I
values
think
are
what
shared by
we're
a lot of
missing
different
is here,
people and
are
religions.
England
and-
supposed to be an independent entity to both Sinn Féin and the DUP? So you've got the whole peace process that's going to...
Yeah.
Already, they haven't managed to form a sort of administration
Well, there is
over
a
the
problem there.
last
There's
3
a
months.
constitutional
Yeah.
problem there because when they did the Northern Ireland
Peace process.
yeah, one of the clauses in that was that the British government could not have any unfair
Involvement,
influence on either side of the divide, yeah?
Yep.
And of course, if they go in coalition with the DUP, then that's structural in there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so I think
Well,
there's a
that
conflict.
fell
But
apart
that's the
just
whole
before
point of
Martin
coalitions
McGuinness
form. You're
died.
not going to get everyone on the same wavelength in terms of views and values,
Well,
religious,
they
whatever.
get the Sinn Féin involved as well.
Exactly. So,
Grand coalition.
you know,
is
17, yeah, you're
it's
looking
a
at
bit like
17
those who
MPs.
are in other countries of it's not democracy and and a part of linked to state terrorism and stuff like that. So they're sitting in political seats and funding terrorism on the basis of some of these religious views that they would strongly disagree with. And I think, if someone disagrees with something, I have no problem with that, as long as you can justify it, you can factually argue it, blah, blah, X, Y, and Z. But for her to shift over to the DUP, which no one expected whatsoever, if they don't believe something, fair dues, we all have values.
And viewers
and I
need to
disagree
know.
with some stuff, and then I probably get shot for it. But my point is that, interesting enough, the last coalition was Lib Dems, and David Cameron, and he managed to coerce and bend Nick Clegg's
But
arm.
Nick Clegg lost his seat this time,
Yeah.
which is surprising.
And-
Well, you live by the
Was it
sword, you die by the
surprising?
sword.
That's what he said.
Exactly. It's
But
true saying he said
it's
true.
surprising that he loses his seat after having spent 5 years in power, sharing
Well, I
power.
think you recognise that.
He'd already... He didn't do anything
It was
sort
the
of...
Sheffield students that voted him out.
Sheffield students, indeed, they did, but they voted him, they kept him there in 2015,
No, but he was
which
only
was
elected.
surprising.
But in 2010, by the time he did it, because of the nature. No, but what it is the forming of the coalition government that really
Yeah, in
gave it 2010. 2010.
Yeah,
so really, so
then he
once they
survived
form
2015.
15, which, yeah.
no, it's 2015 after where he started to crumble.
No, he crumbled, and he gave up the leadership until
Yeah,
Farron
yeah.
came in,
Yeah.
but he still won his seat. He was still an MP in 2015, but yet
But
Thursday,
changed, yeah.
he literally... they didn't
Yeah,
even
yeah.
have-
I want to
bring
ask
him back
Suki and
Parliament
Jaspreet
as an
something.
MP.
Yeah, I mean, Theresa May is a woman, yeah? Do you think if she had been a man that she would have got maybe a better kind of deal in terms of how the press has hounded her now? Or do you think that...
No.
So
I
you're
don't.
quite happy for her to be
No,
held up as a
I'm a
failure?
firm believer of Ape Beej, Ape Khao. She's getting
Bar
everything
Higuru.
she deserves.
So you don't think that the gender wasn't an issue
Oh
there?
no.
Yeah.
I think what
I don't think
you
it
have
was
to be
mentioned
careful of
much.
now is that there's a lot of people calling her names based on that she's a woman, and I
Yeah,
don't
that-
think you
that's
should be
absolutely
doing that.
wrong, yeah.
I don't think you should be doing that. If you are going to cuss her, like I have been doing quite openly,
Yeah.
cuss it on the things that she has done wrong. She didn't even appear on Women's Hour. She sent, the things that she's meant to be doing. Look at the WASPI campaign. These women whose their pensions were delayed. They weren't even given a mention in her manifesto. So she wasn't really a champion for women or an inspiration for women, to be honest. So.
I think her leadership skills allowed them to not even address the fact that she's female.
Yeah.
Not appearing on a main debate, not allowing a debate with Jeremy Corbyn
course.
in the same
See,
room. It made the fact that she was female not even come into question
No.
because
And
she was
try-
doing other things wrong.
I'm just saying about females and trying to compare and equate it to the days of the Iron Lady. It's a totally different thing altogether. When we talk about Iron Lady, we literally meant Iron Lady.
But she did make a claim
I question
to
if
that,
she had
didn't
any more.
Yeah, she wanted
She
that.
claimed that before the election,
Do you
didn't she?
think-
Said that,
but
Do you think Margaret
there's only
Thatcher
one
got
Iron
away
Lady,
with
isn't there, really?
without having social media to contend with? Do you think the Iron Lady would have survived after 1982, the Belgrano, what we know now, that was a retreating ship that was attacked, a possible war crime.
I
Do you think she would have survived up to
Statutes.
1990, 8 years,
Yeah.
with people
Well,
knowing
I
those sort of
actually
things?
wrote something just today on that, because there was a piece that was published about the Guardian reporting, and most of the main Guardian columnists were anti-Corbyn.
Anti-Corbyn, absolutely, yeah.
And the fact, and that's supposed to be a pro-Labour paper.
Yeah.
So the fact that nearly all of the print media was against Corbyn, and Corbyn still came out, okay, he wasn't victorious, but he didn't lose, suggests that the social media now is a much bigger player in terms
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
determining
agree.
people's opinions, and I
Yeah.
think that's absolutely the case.
So that's what I'm asking. So then, do you think that played a part within
Absolutely.
Maggie Thatcher, and the comparison with Theresa May is not really
Well,
that fair?
no.
If you follow the media, I mean the print media, then she should have won hands down. And because they were all backing
Yeah,
her,
yeah.
and there was nobody backing Corbyn, even the Labour,
Even the Labour Party
begrudging. So
paper.
the fact that that wasn't able to influence the vote.
PLP wasn't. Forget about the Labour, the press.
Yeah.
The Labour Party wasn't backing
So I
Corbyn.
think social
Yeah.
Do you know
media,
what I mean?
and of course that's where young people are particularly prevalent, aren't they?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even a little thing like Snapchat, which is a social media platform, on the day of voting, there was a filter that could say, I'm voting for Labour. Now, that's such a small thing,
Yeah.
but it
Yeah,
made
but
people
everyone
then
use it, yeah.
publicise what they were doing. And that's probably something that as young people, they've not engaged in that before.
No.
Do you think people that voted Tory still put that on their Snapchat? Just voted Labour.
Just to be popular, go with the
just-
crowd.
yeah, why not? Can't
in
be,
some- the
can't
other
be the
thing
only one out of my friends that didn't. So I voted Labour as well.
The other thing about social media, of course, it's not just what's on on Facebook. It's also about people going around with their mobile phones. Yeah.
Yeah.
So actually, social media, in a kind of strange way, has taken politics back onto the streets,
Yeah.
onto the soap
Yeah,
opera.
absolutely. Yeah.
And
I mean,
this is
people
where
are
I
taking
think
their dogs to the polling station.
Yeah,
My dog
yeah.
at the polling station
Yeah.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
But that's where the campaigns are won, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you go out into the community.
Absolutely,
Because
yeah.
you
And
know, we're
that's
not-
why he's always consistently
Yeah.
done well.
Exactly.
He
And-
knows how to interact. He knows how to and you know
Yeah.
what? He actually cares, because I was part of the roundtable discussion with Jeremy back in November,
Yeah.
and that was organised by Sikhs for Labour with Sikh
Yeah.
Councils, SLPW, and quite a
In
few other
November, wasn't it?
organisations, and just putting my issues towards him. I mean, I took up my discussion was about the political prisoners, 1984, and some residual cases of Sikhs in the
So you
UK
were there as
still.
Sikh relief.
Yeah, as Sikh
Yeah.
relief. But there were still Sikhs in the UK who have problems at airports when they're leaving the country
Yes.
because of
Yeah,
past
yeah, yeah.
associations. And sort of he addressed all of those, and he even said it himself without me saying anything. He goes, I remember being in Parliament when 1984 happened. We could clearly see what was happening, and I will always stand by that independent inquiry about what that then Tory government had to do with that attack. It wasn't even a demand I had to put to him. He actually said it to me because I had like a 3-minute window to get all my points across, and I forgot to ask the question, and he actually answered it for me, which was for me was very, very refreshing. All the issues, and he actually said very honestly, he goes, I did not understand these things were issues for you, and he goes, it's really refreshing that you put this to my attention and you've brought these things to me, and I now see the subtle differences between
And he won it on
Sikhs and-
engagement. That's how he
Yeah.
won more votes,
Yeah.
on engagement. He
Yeah.
played that
Genuine
incredibly.
engagement.
genuine
You think-
engagement.
In a general sense, with Labour and whoever, the question, which is quite disturbing for the years ahead, is they're all talking about going to give this money out and save the tuition fees and etc. etc. But yet the problem we've got, the pound's getting weaker compared to Europe and even to America. It's dropping at a rapid rate. And in the next 5 years, let's be honest and realistic, if we can project our profits or whatever you want to call it, do you really think the pound's going to be strong as it is? And this is the things that we have to look at, saying we negotiated a Brexit deal.
See, the
If we
weaker the
come out of
pound
Europe, we're
gets,
going to go weaker to another extent.
political turmoil that's
But
frightening.
Yeah.
So I
Exactly.
believe in
Yeah.
time to come, we are not going to be in a very good position. or whatever
economy-wise, the top 100 FTSE companies, the weaker the pound is,
Yeah.
because they deal in other currencies,
Right.
the more money they make.
Yeah.
But
So
then that's
although
not
the
good for
pound
the
in our
economy.
pocket is worth less, the economy is actually
better.
sort of better off.
Yeah, but we were difficult because apparently we all, look how many countries owe X money to Europe. They bail them out for paying this and they bail them out for paying that. There's certain packages in place, financial packages, which is really costing us.
IMF
And there's a dent in our
the-
particular armour on that basis, and we need to be looking at that very carefully. Who's going to take our debt? We've seen people like in places like Greece committing suicide killing because of the financial thing. 4 million children in poverty, and this is the things that I would like to look at. How are you going to take us out of, number one, we're out of Europe, so the things like skills, manpower, money, education, employment, going to go rapidly down. People are going to charge you more. Yes, it's good for countries like India. Apparently, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in India where India's going to be thriving financially from this because people are shifting their resources where it's way cheaper, isn't it? Sorry?
Potentially.
But that's what's on the table. These are the discussions that are taking place. These are what people are looking at in things like, you know, when I was reading something where, you know, India and other countries will benefit because obviously people shift their companies there. It's going to be more cost effective because Europe's going to get more expensive, you know, and all these kind of things that we're looking at. So really,
I'm also scared of labour though, really.
Years.
Doesn't that lead to the fact that she doesn't have a mandate then?
Yeah.
We've just
Well, it's
said?
back to what I said earlier, and we've been
have
saying
one.
earlier, you exactly said that, you know, they hit the nail on the head to
I mean,
what does she have that's going to be effective enough to negotiate intellect, whatever you want to look at it for. us
Should
to
there be a
there.
push for a cross-party delegation that does the negotiation?
I think we do need a delegation.
Yeah.
I agree, we
Does
do
have
need a
to-
delegation.
yeah.
Well, I mean, in a sense, there is a possibility of delaying it for another year, but they'd have to get all of the states to agree to that.
Yeah.
Failing that, then, you know, unless they have a cross-party consensus, I don't see how they can actually negotiate anything.
No.
So that's a real problem. But I know we're coming to an end of the problem.
Almost.
You know, I think really, for me, this is a historic moment.
Oh,
And
definitely.
I'll tell you why it's a historic moment. You know, we've shifted the consensus now. The centre of politics is no
Yeah.
longer in the middle, the middle ground now. I think we've brought it back to,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, nationalisation and things like that. So I think that's important. But
Well, it's
you know, if
50-50
you were on a-
really.
if you were on a holiday and you kind of, you know, 6 months ago, and you know, Labour was going to disintegrate, the Tories were going to get stronger and stronger, and the opposites happen. You know, it's crazy, isn't it?
But politics is a funny game.
We have
because-
to bear in mind, Labour lost this election.
yeah.
And
Overall,
it
doesn't seem like
yeah,
it.
It doesn't
absolutely.
feel that
Only
way.
because
I
of
think-
what we were seeing in the media.
I think
I mean,
where
In reality, the reality has never changed.
If we even
Yeah,
take
There are
Kensington,
still a lot of people in the UK.
And
Kensington
Battersea
shopping.
and
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Westbury.
because if you think about it, the
Wealthy.
last decade, 2010, it was Labour dominated, so to speak. This one appears now it's going to be conservative.
We're not
So-
dominated.
What do you mean by
because it's
dominated?
300
They were in power, weren't they, really?
318 plays.
No, but no, what I'm saying,
262.
by the time they came into power, Tony Blair's administration, so they went for about a good 10 years. But really, from post-2000, it was Labour, wasn't it?
What this
Yeah.
election has shown is that the country is well and truly divided.
Yes.
There is no centre ground.
No.
There are hard left, which
Yeah.
is what Corbyn is,
And Scottish
and hard
Scottish
right.
Conservative,
Yeah.
Scottish Labour. I think, you know, they're going to act more independently now. I think, you know. I
But
think
even Scotland has shown,
Yeah.
gone from 59 seats, 56 of 59 seats, to 35.
yeah.
That's divided completely,
Yeah.
completely.
But
And is this
and that's going to get even bigger, and that's that particular
the potentially? But I'm
proximity
saying where we are.
is because of Brexit as well. We're going to take consideration. We've just triggered Article 50.
But Scotland
That's in the process.
overwhelmingly voted to
Yeah.
remain,
Yeah.
Yeah, but
as did Northern Ireland, including the DUP.
even though the overwhelmingly said that, and that's fine, we are still headed towards a Brexit in Article 50. Now, I think there's one way that can be U-turn. I think there's, if they vote or the change of particular government, something like effect, and I need to clarify that, is they can retract Article.
don't think
I'm
anyone
not
will be
entirely sure, but I
No,
need to
well,
look
Labour
where
is going
the
to do
possibility,
that,
if it can
and
potentially
that's
happen, that's
political
going to be down the
suicide
line.
for either
I'm not
party.
entirely sure, I'm just
No.
speculating on
Yeah,
that. If that is
nobody
not
has
the case,
muted that.
Just to say,
No.
if
Jeremy
that-
Corbyn, Brexit is Brexit.
Yeah, well,
Theresa
The
May,
Lib
Brexit
Dems
is
are the only
Brexit.
ones
So,
that
yeah,
said
Lib
they're
Dem.
fine,
either
and
way,
they didn't get
either
it.
way, then it goes what I'm saying. We are headed for
Of
a
course,
bigger
I mean, we
divide.
haven't mentioned Nigel Farage, and he's now threatening to come back, isn't he?
It'd be interesting.
Well,
to
because
go
Paul
here.
got
Yeah, he said
nothing,
Nuttall's
so...
gone now, so
He's coming
Farage,
back, he's coming
Farage
back.
thinking he might have to come back and be the knight in shining
Although I
armour.
don't know
He's
about
more
you,
than
but I
welcome
think
to it.
UKIP
Knight
has-
in
has
dust.
done
But
their job.
Nigel Farage, one thing
Literally.
I will say about Nigel Farage is some of the views are very contentious and controversial, but as a person in debate and he articulates his points very well. I'll give him that.
He does,
You know,
yeah.
and I have to. I will pat him on the back.
Pompously, but well.
Yeah.
He when he say articulate his point, I didn't say that I agree or
No.
some of them. I'm saying the way he debates,
He
and
enunciates well.
he took them.
Yeah, so-
Yeah.
He gave him a run for the money at the last debate. Remember that debate? And I tell you one thing, he gave him a real run for the money.
Yeah, he's a good liar as well.
Yeah, this is the point.
I
I
mean,
won't say
this
he's
is-
a lawyer, but he's a
What-
liar.
Was it 350 million pounds?
Yeah, absolutely,
a week
yeah.
Get back, you know.
Yeah, well, so you
This
got
is a
somebody-
guy.
No,
Look,
but
you
this was
can't
my-
base
that
this
was my whole
guy's
issue.
debating skills on how he's saying something. He may be able to debate well, But if the,
But look at him in
the
MEP.
substance of what you're saying is untrue,
Exactly. Look at him in MEP. How are you seeing that as a good thing?
How he debates with them and how he's challenging them in a very broad European arena now is very intriguing.
He insults them.
I think
Exactly.
you keep
And he's very direct.
you
Him and Trump are like,
you
but I
keep
think
a
they relate.
speculation,
You keep our finish.
as fun as it is,
I'll finish.
is unreal.
Yeah.
The reality is we have a hung parliament.
Absolutely.
We have no majority government at the moment.
Not at the moment.
One that's in talks with extremists.
Disturbing.
Do you think we've got literally 2 or 3 minutes left? So a quick gauge on everybody's opinion on: do you think we're going to have an election in the next 2 years?
Yes.
In a nutshell, give and take, everything that we're taking said until this point, I think there's a possibility because a lot of people
Remembering
are still
that the
unsure.
Brexit negotiations are 2 years.
Yeah, what I'm saying, yeah, I believe there probably would be because a lot of people are still unsure around where we stand.
So whoever begins the negotiations won't be the one ending them.
Most likely.
I don't
Yeah,
think that we will have
yeah,
another election.
Yeah.
You don't
I don't
think we will?
so.
I
I
think
think
it's-
they'll change leadership within the Conservative Party, but will not call another election because we need that. We need that consistency for.
Jeremy
Brexit
Corbyn always felt he
negotiations.
could have taken this one. So there's all.
I
They
think
won't
if
call
we look
it.
at the
They know they
past
can lose
history
it.
of minority governments, they've never lasted more than
yeah.
more than 2
I-
years.
And this is particularly tense.
Yeah.
These 2 years are going to
Yeah, and I.
So it could
be
go
unprecedented.
Yeah,
It
this
really
is
is
the most
unprecedented.
most touch nervy, nail biting 2 years we're going to have over the last 2
It's
years.
so
I think-
difficult. We've
But then
not-
I think everything
Corbyn
could change
momentum
as
is
well.
there,
I mean, the
though.
way this election has gone, you know, it's
Yeah.
very hard to sort of be certain on anything. But
Yeah.
the history of minority governments has never lasted.
I just think that the Corbyn momentum is there, so the
Yeah.
Conservative Party will do everything they can to prevent calling.
Yeah, a general election. It would be suicide for
Yeah,
them. Because at the
exactly.
moment, I think as it sits, there are 30 seats that have a swing. That
Buzzy
that can
quickly.
swing to
Well,
Labour.
I mean, I think
17 with the
we
left
should
with
be
a swing
we're
of
foolish to
1,000.
predict given what's happened so far, yeah? But I think that I suggest that maybe there might be a constitutional crisis. The Queen might pull in the leaders and form some kind of national, consensus.
like a president's rule type
Yeah,
of
a
thing.
consensus just to deal with the Brexit thing. I can't see anything else. You know.
No,
Wow.
fair.
Unprecedented times, possibly unprecedented measures, definitely out of time here. We've still got another 2 years of negotiation. We've got another 2 years of uncertainty for sure, and we'll see where we are then. We've tried to get through as much as we can. We've probably not got through as much as you'd probably hope. You're sitting there wondering why we didn't speak about this, and we missed that, and we totally ignored the other. But, you know, we all have our frailties and we all have our shortcomings. So, Paul Chukmaf, that's it for us today. Catch us again on Wednesday, the regular 9:40 encounters. I'll be speaking with Jaswant Bora and possibly Amar Singh Chahal. So until then, Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.
106 ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੇਖੇ ਜਾ ਰਹੇ ਅਕਾਲ ਚੈਨਲ ਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੀ ਕੋਨੇ ਤੋਂ ਲਾਈਵ ਜਾਂ ਡੀ ਲਾਈਵ ਕਰਨ ਦੀ ਪੂਰੀ ਟੈਕਨੋਲੋਜੀ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਹੈ। ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਸਾਰਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਹਾਈ ਡੈਫੀਨੇਸ਼ਨ ਤੇ ਕਵਰ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾਵੇਗਾ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੁਰੂ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਦੇ ਪੈਗਾਮ ਨੂੰ ਘਰ-ਘਰ ਤੱਕ ਪਹੁੰਚਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਤਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਹੀ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਰਿਕਾਰਡ ਕਰਵਾਉਣ ਲਈ ਸੰਪਰਕ ਕਰੋ 077 027 489063